just about music, and it was reflected in everything that was in the store. What I don't know who's going to be the best. Actually, Tim, our engineer, might even be the best to answer this question. What made them, did Jim and Danny have any, because our engineer, Tim, recorded Wax Trax 001, the Strike Under record. Awesome record.
Thank you.
What made them want to start a label, you know?
What's it? No. Well, all the bands in Chicago, Strike Under, Naked Ray Gun, Effigies, Da, Silver Abuse, they would go to Wax Trax Records every Saturday like everybody else, so we would congregate there. And one thing that people may not have mentioned is the records that were released in England, we would get like 3 or 4 days later at Wax Trax. So we would see the records, we would be able to buy the records before you even read about them in New Musical Express, because that came after the record. So anyway, the band started hanging out there, and I was recording a bunch of the punk bands for fun, and with Terry Nelson from WZRD Radio. And my roommate Bob Thuram was the drummer in Strike Under, and they wanted to do a recording, and I snuck them in the studio that I used to work at after hours, unbeknownst to the management. And we recorded this EP, and they cut a deal with Jim to release the record on Wax Trax. It was just kind of a one-off fun thing. You know, they had silkscreen dust covers for the record, right. And it was just something for fun. I don't think Jim had an idea that he was going to start a label at that point. But
did your dad ever talk about wanting to do a label and put records out?
No. As the legend, as the legend had it, it was like basically they told me that kids were just coming in and asking for a Strike Under record, and Jim was like, "Why don't you guys have a record out?" And they were just like, "Because we don't have any money." He's like, "I'll give you money," and he gave them $500, and that was pretty much it.
And I got 20.
And then they literally, so there I said 10 years later, and Jim's like, "I never meant to start a record company, it just happened," It was just like, here we sit, 20 employees, it's like, okay, here we are.
But even before that, they did the Eno record, right? They allegedly did the Eno record. And was it Lion Sleeps Tonight, 7-inch? And then I think, I'd heard rumor of a Neo Dolls live record. Rumor, I don't know if it's true.
Well,
so they did have some forays into doing.
So in that story, so you brought up Steve Knudsen, and just to so I cut to 5 years later after I worked at Wax Trax. I'm in New York City, and I ended up with my label doing a joint venture with Tommy Boy Records, where Steve Knudsen ended up being the vice president of marketing. And so I had this meeting, and my lawyer is coming in, who was this guy David Kotico, who's was Nirvana's lawyer, etc., and he's my lawyer. So he walks into the meeting, and Knudsen goes, "I know you." And it turned out that when Kotico was going to law school, he used to come into the store in Denver and sell bootlegs. And it was just the most perfect thing that my lawyer had sold bootlegs at the Wax Trax store. It just spoke volumes about the music industry.
Going back a little bit to Denver, because a lot of people don't even know that the Wax Trax in Denver became the Wax Trax in Chicago. Do you remember why your dad wanted to move to Denver? To Chicago from Denver?
I would imagine, we never had this conversation, but it's the same reason why I moved here from Kansas. There's a lot more going on here.
I guess that makes sense. I guess I could have answered my own question.
They used to drive to San Francisco and Chicago because no shows came to Denver. That was the thing. They used to have to drive both ways to go to see shows, and that's why they moved to Chicago. They were either going to go to San Francisco or Chicago, and they chose Chicago. It's just no shows came to Denver.
Yeah, that's my understanding. They came to Chicago because of the music scene here. And it wasn't really happening in Denver, and Chicago was happening, and that's where they moved.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's something that we've talked about amongst ourselves, and Tim might know something about this. It seemed like there were some Chicago people that didn't necessarily welcome Wax Trax with open arms, like some other record stores, and they kind of felt like, who are these carpetbaggers?
I know nothing about that.
Yeah, obviously not you, people we know, probably, I mean, we'll probably get into it in the documentary. I'll rope some of those people into some interviews and find out why, but that kind of goes in with the whole Chicago, you know, this is our little thing, and you know, who are you guys from Denver coming in here?
I'm unaware of that.
I think it was after our time, or before our time.
Before,
Yeah, that was like the Lemaire crowd. Some of the Lemaire crowd was not.
What talking about? We're still here.
Okay, so, but anyway, they did form a label, and it was weird because it was, you know, the label is known to be kind of, you know, industrial-ish, but they started out putting out a punk record, and then the second record was, of course, the Divine record, which makes sense. And then the third record was Ministry, correct? Was it Cold Life?
Yeah.
And so then, now was Cold Life recorded at Trax? I'm not sure.
I don't believe it was recorded at Trax, but we did a lot of work. When was that released?
I think it was 82
Okay.
or 81?
I think it was in 1981.
81, right, because it was before With Sympathy.
That was recorded out in Schaumburg at,
Head and
Sound
West.
Impressions?
no, Head and West.
Head and West.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
Yeah, no, we started working with Ministry and Wax Trax in '83, and I think we were doing remixes of Halloween at the time. Continuous remixes of Halloween from the Blood Song with the Mad Scientist Al having tape hanging off the wall.
That's because.
Gluing it together.
That's when
That's why we didn't get child support.
No.
It's all that.
Wow. Revelations.
Figured it out.
He was actually taking lessons trying to fix that English accent that he had.
No, it's true, we did Halloween.
There wasn't a plug-in for that just yet. So, but I mean, I remember when the first Ministry record came out, when Cold Life, and it was like a big deal because they got written up in, I think it was Sounds or NME, and they had a huge spread on Wax Trax, and then all of a sudden they were like, the cat's meow, and that obviously brought a lot of attention. I mean, what's I'm trying to think of you guys who would have been there when that was going on, because that obviously changed things. Sean?
No, I mean, I can only remember them just being played on XRT. I just remember them being played on XRT when they were on Arista, when the With Sympathy album came out. So I like Cold Life era, I don't know anything about really.
Well, they had legitimate club. I mean, we're having club hits in Detroit. So I mean, that was, you know, for us, it was kind of like records would hit from different places. We had New York records hitting, Chicago records hitting, London, and Ministry records were literally hitting and holding up, you know, globally. Like you'd pop into a club in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, wherever, and you'd hear Ministry records everywhere. And so it was, you know, they were definitely like on the path, 82, 83 already.
Chris, had you heard of them when they came out with Cold Life and I'm Falling and all that?
No, I didn't hear about them until the single Nature of Love, which might be number 3 or 4 or something like that. And prior to that, because they were on Beggar's Banquet in the UK. Cold Life came out in Beggar's Banquet, but I didn't pay any attention to it at all.
I do remember that. So Cold Life, I'm Falling, Cat's Meow, and then typical British press, when With Sympathy came out, turned around and slammed them and hated them and gave it the worst review ever. And so I do remember that part.
Yeah,
So-
well, you know, that was a very different sounding album to those singles.
Right.
Had a beautiful cover.
Yes.
Cover.
It had a nice die-cut cover.
Yes.
I have a cassette of the second album, the follow-up to that record.
Uh-huh.
I got in the back room at the record store. It's like a follow-up to that. It's like
To With Sympathy.
Yeah,
That never came out.
yeah.
Wow.
Okay, will we be selling these in the lobby, maybe, copies of this?
Yes.
There was also the cassette that we had that was the record on one side and the interview with him on the other side. And it was the all English accent.
He never really lost the English accent.
No, it was just some Arista promo.
We have that cassette at home. It came on a 7-inch. Didn't it come stuck to a 7-inch or
Yes.
something?
Yeah.
And it's him just talking.
Talking.
Is he talking in an English
He did a
accent?
Roxy Music cover song. Was
My dad always told me I was too immature for Roxy music.
Photos though, the sad photos? You read up those?
Mark would know. He knows all
Mark.
that. I'm in school.
Mark,
I'm
do you have the
Do you
sad-
have the sad photos, Mark?
Okay, steering it back to the label. We're in someone's living room as it, which is fine. So